What's up, everybody? Happy, what is today? Wednesday. It's 10 o'clock, and wanted to hop on here today to do a little discussion, if you will, on some inspiration. We did this last week. We talked about songwriting. And what's up, everybody? And wanted to hop on there today and talk about what it means to be inspired. And I'm going to speak specifically from me in this kind of way. But I thought these kinds of things would be sort of fun, especially given the fact that there's a lot of different opinions out there and perspectives. With last week and talking about songwriting, I realized that there's a lot of different people that have written songs. And so you don't need to hear me as my way, or even assume that I think that my ways are the only ways. I am such a student of other songwriters, and I love learning from other people, so it's awesome. Anyway, so what do you guys think? What if we spend the next 20 minutes together just talking about these things? Fire away on questions, always good. Love hearing about those, and wanted to kind of give you a little bit of like updates on some things as we jump in. The first one is I'd really like to be able to do these once a week. I think it'd be really cool, and I'd also love to have guests on where we sort of talk about some of these things. I am particularly fascinated about inspiration, and the reason why is because I think that there is this idea around songwriting. Sometimes I'm guilty of this too, where someone writes a song and then we want to know exactly what it means. We want them to tell us what it means. We want, it's kind of like when everybody saw Inception and they were so angry because they wanted, Christopher Nolan to give us the entire scoop of what it actually means at the end when he sees the spinning top and all this kind of stuff. So, all that to say, I don't think that that's the most helpful thing, and the reason why is I think that we have our own experiences tied to the art that we appreciate and that we're ourselves investing in. And I think that to give the full story or the exact meaning doesn't do the song or the art justice, because at the end of the day, we have these imaginations that I think that we could do a better job of letting them sort of just happen. And I think that just because of the fact that we have as a band existed primarily within the Christian sphere, less subculture, but more just as Christians making music, making songs. Originally, we wrote a lot of songs for the church. This new record isn't so much that, but we'll keep making songs for the church. But we also like to have conversations with people that don't necessarily identify with who we are and also share the exact same views. But I do think that one of the things that is going on, that the reason why so many people typically, I think, really, really want everything to be explained to them, in particular within the Christian realm, is I'm gonna say this, and you're if you're watching this, you might push back, and it's totally fine if you do. But I think that one of the main reasons that this has happened is we've become accustomed to needing everything to be explained to us. And I think that this happens primarily within the Christian sphere on a Sunday as we listen to the pastor preach. I think there's a lot of people that preach in a really powerful, amazing way. Many, 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 many people. But I also think that even those people that do a great job have been sort of swept up into this cultural phenomenon, which is, let me give you these 10 steps to figuring out your life on this Sunday, and that's going to be the thing that sets you straight for this next week. And then the next week, I'm going to give you another 10 things. And the next week, I'm going to give you another 10 things. And you see this process and what's happening. What's the watering hole? The watering hole is the pastor. The watering hole is this one person who has all the knowledge, and we're going to them. It's not Jesus, right? It's not God. It's not, we're coming to God as our source of clarity, our source of discernment, our source of inspiration, our source of peace, our source of comfort, our source of love and of grace and of peace, all the fruits, right? We have become accustomed within the church to expect things to be explained to us in really, really specific ways. We have a problem in our life. Now, pastor stands up, and I'm going to tell you what that is. I was reading this morning in John 11, and I think there's something really important to get from this, and that's that in John 11 it talks of he's just healed Lazarus, and there's the Jewish leaders are together because there's some Jews who saw Lazarus raised from the dead and were moved so deeply by it, and they believe. And there's others that are little tattletales, and they go off and tell the Pharisees. And so they go to the high priest, Caiaphas, I believe that's how you say his name. Some of those names I get tripped up on, but we'll just say that's his name. And, they're saying, they're worried that if Jesus keeps healing all these people and does all these things, the Romans are going to come in and try and take them over. They're like, well, no, you're missing the point here. It's better that one person die for the people than for the whole nation to suffer. And what is so interesting to me about this is it says after that he wasn't speaking on his own accord, but because he was high priest, he prophesied. And I just thought, oh my gosh, isn't that incredible? That God puts these people in positional authority. He speaks through them. And there's these moments in life where a pastor or somebody in authority has the ability and they prophesy or they say something really powerful, something really true, maybe a lot of things that God is speaking through them, not on their accord, but God is speaking through them. And what happens is we see that, and we as people who receive that say, oh my gosh, look at that person. They have so much wisdom. They have so much knowledge. They're the best. They're the ones that have everything put together, and I need to listen to them. And then that person who's preaching consequently says, I'm the guy. I'm the one who had that idea. I prayed for that person and they were healed. I prayed for that person and now they don't have this issue anymore. I'm the guy. And so we've created this culture where everything is about needing to know exactly what to do, exactly what life is all about and what our next steps are, because we've been relying on people as the source of our inspiration. Now, I do think that I don't want to get too meta here, because I think inspiration happens in a lot of ways, and I am inspired by lots of different people. I'm inspired in lots of different ways. I'm simply speaking from the perspective of art in the church. And I think that there's been this cultural expectation that when someone writes a song that's a Christian and they tell a story, there's this expectation that it needs to be explained to everybody in order for them to exactly know what it means. And if it's not done, then all of a sudden that's a problem. And I think that that's just not what art is about. I don't need, as an artist, I don't need to tell you everything that a song's about. As a person who enjoys listening to music, I don't want to know what a song is, exactly what a song is about. What I want to know is what inspired it. Where do these stories where are they birthed from? Because sometimes you could hear the question asked, how did you write this song? And then it becomes more about the mechanics, right? It's like, okay, let me lift up the hood and let's talk about what's underneath. On the flip side, I think when we talk about what's inspired this, there's a completely different kind of conversation. It's kind of going back to what I'm talking about with, a pastor who's preaching, and we say, oh man, they have all this secret wisdom and all this knowledge, and they let that get to their head. And we've seen it time again. We were a part of a church that was like that. I've been a part of other churches that were like that. It is a really common thing because we're human beings, and if we're not kept in check, and if we don't have people around us that remind us that it is God's and not ours, we get sideways, right? In the same way, I think that we as Christians want to constantly attribute all these amazing things to people rather than to God. And I think that at the same time too, because inspiration is such an amazing sort of if you tried to just if a strong wind comes through and you try and give it a bear hug, you're not going to be able to do it. It's just going to go right through your arms. I feel like that's what inspiration is like. It's like this thing that's moving all around us. And I think that God wants us to be inspired just like he wants us to feel emotion, and wants us to think, and wants us to find that these aspects of our existence and these things that we experience every day were intended for us. So when we feel certain things and we think certain things and we taste certain things and we hear certain things and we feel certain things, all this, God gave us these senses and these abilities, I think, because he wanted us to have them, right? And so inspiration is one of them. Now, this is what I don't want to do. I'm not saying that, because this is probably this is the least inspiring thing to me in the whole world, I think. Actually, there's another one too. But one of the things that really is not inspiring to me is when people try to make all things that are inspirational as somehow God is, that we have to sort of like baptize it in Christianity. I don't think that that's true at all. I think God moves through so many people. I can't tell you how many people have inspired me, how many artists have inspired me that were not Christians and may never be. And that is, one, a confounding thought for me as I think about that. Just because I feel indebted to some of those people, some of those artists that I still listen to today, that I wouldn't be the songwriter that I am. I became a student of their craft and of their ability and of what they were contributing and how they were being vulnerable. And now I feel like I have a sense and ability to do the same because they were willing to put themselves out there like that. I think that that's inspiration comes from a lot of different ways. What I think, though, is at the same time, as Christians, we can acknowledge that, wow, all right, let's dig down to the roots of all this. God is creator of all things. We're all existing because God made us. And so God has created people that within themselves are able to be inspirational. That's really cool when you think about that. That it's not always God necessarily moving through that person, but God created that person, and therefore they have the capacity, just like you and me, to be inspiring. In the same way, I think that inspiration comes from a lot of different things. Some days, inspiration comes through a conversation. It comes through a song that I hear. It comes through looking out my window and seeing just the mountains or the trees or a bird. Inspiration is not as simple as this very tight grid. I think we want to do the same thing with theology, where we want to say A plus B equals C, and we just are really firm in that, and we've developed that mentality because we have said that everything, like as soon as somebody has convinced us, then it must be true. Whoa, that's crazy. Think about that. As soon as someone's convinced us, then it must be true. That is kind of a scary thought when you really think about that. And I think that at the same time though, I think there's also a bit of truth to that. And so it's sort of like this, like these competing things happening, because sometimes I listen to songs that are about heartbreak. Just, like one of my favorite songs, I think I've talked about this before. I think it's just such a beautiful song. I hate every single arrangement and cover that's ever been done of it. In fact, she didn't even write this song. But the song that Bonnie Raitt sang back in the 90s, I Can't Make You Love Me. When I listen to that song, I'll turn it on after we're done here just because I love it so much. I relate to that this much. Just absolutely none. But that song speaks to me in such a deep way. And I'm convinced by her delivery. And so guess what? I believe her. It's true. And I think there's something really powerful about that. It doesn't mean that it's ultimate truth for me, because I don't have something in my life that somehow like crosses into it. It makes me feel like this is cathartic because I'm going through this experience, and so therefore I relate to it. No, there's just something about her honesty in the way that she's delivering these lyrics that I feel a sense of connection. And it is cathartic to me. And it inspires me to think about actual events in my life and things that are happening. I think that's the beauty of art, when we're willing to be open-minded and we don't need things to exactly tailor to who we are and the exact space that we're in, but to understand that artistry, and as it's being presented, is being delivered from this person to a bunch of other people. In the same way, it's impossible to write one song that everybody can love. We also can't write one song that everybody's going to hate. Everybody receives things in different ways. Inspiration is this wind that's moving all around us, and you can't hold it down. You can't, grab it. You can't put it in a box. It's happening. And so what I wanted to just do over the next little bit is not just today, but for the next couple weeks, is just like talk about inspiration. Because I think that if we really get down to the nuts and bolts of like life and the things happening around us, I don't think it's just about artistry, and I don't think it's just about being a songwriter or identifying as a creative person, although I think all of us are creative people. Just like I think all of us are smart in different ways, and all of us are weak in certain things and strong in others. Like, it's really kind of silly to sort of categorize people because someone's like amazing with math that they're like somehow like emotionally inept. Like, I think that that's really silly because I can't do that. I mean, I barely even understand. I never made it past like pre-calculus, you know? And so when I sit down and I see like numbers and different things, I'm like, I'm done. It's an art. Like, what they're doing is an art. But what I'd like to do is also bring in to the conversation other artists and other people let's learn from other people about what inspiration is, and let's learn and discover what it means to be inspired by lots of different things. Yes, ultimately deep within our souls, inspired by God, to live lives of faithful obedience. And at the same time, there's also these sort of like peripheral inspirations that are happening all around us that I think if we really want to get down to it, I think we could say, yeah, God wanted me to be inspired, and that's a really wonderful thing. I'm not necessarily saying that that's the law you need to live by. What I'm saying is that there is inspiration happening. I see, for me personally, lots of ways in my life where I can say, whoa, okay, God, I'm looking back on this now and I'm seeing you did something so much bigger than I ever could have anticipated, and I didn't even see it in the moment. And now when I'm looking back on it, it's plain as day. But sometimes inspiration is like these small little things, like you're making dinner and you get inspired to put an extra ingredient in there. I'm not saying that like God inspired you to make that chili better, but maybe he did. I don't know. I think the bigger thing is just the whole concept of inspiration and being more open-minded to it. One of the things that I was just thinking about in this is like, in the same sense, inspiration is really interesting because I think that we live in a culture right now where we are more influenced by algorithms than we realize. And what I mean by this is there are a lot of things, like I remember when we were working on some things in our house, I was going on Pinterest and I was looking for lighting and for tiles. And, you know, here I am thinking that, man, I'm finding like some really obscure things that no one else has. And this is going to be kind of cool. It's going to make our house sort of unique. And then, you know, I start seeing these tiles popping up everywhere. I'm like, well, what's that all about? Well, it's probably because we were all searching for the same thing and algorithms led us to this place. I mean, there's all this marketing schemes and these different things. And so I think that if we're like just finding if we're seeking inspiration out, I think we also got to be realistic about it too. Because there's also these marketing campaigns that are trying to get us to conform, right? It's probably the reason why most people in Seattle drive Subarus. At the same time, too, I think that inspiration isn't just always like this surface level stuff where I'm just going to type something in. I think it's like digging deep within. What I'm not saying is that, oh man, it's dumb to have your walls painted the same as someone else. I'm not saying we all need to be like uniquely different. I'm just simply saying that I think the ways that we go about finding inspiration are sometimes incongruent with how inspiration actually happens. And what I mean is, I think that most inspiration is happening around us all the time. In fact, maybe even as I'm talking to you right now, you're being inspired, but you're not thinking about it. And so therefore, it's passing by. And while you can't grab it and hold it down, you can grab a pen and write it down. And then it's kept in this place. Or you go to your phone and you record this, what the conversation or the song idea or what it is you're seeing. There's ways that we can document these things. And specifically in songwriting, I think this is something that like I'm trying to grow in, and I think it's something that I've gotten a lot better in over the years. And that's that seeing that inspiration is all around me, trying to be more aware, having all my senses awakened, so that when I'm in a conversation with someone, or when I'm eating food, or when I'm taking a shower, or when I'm going for a run, or I'm playing church softball, or sitting at the piano, or having a conversation with my kids, playing Legos, whatever it is, there's a lot of ways that inspiration is happening. And I kind of just made the decision a few years back that every time inspiration comes, I'm going to figure out a way to document it. because I want to be able to go back to it and I want to be able to reflect on it and see if there's something that could come of it. And so I want to just spend like the next few minutes just like talking a little bit about what it means to like document those things and to grow in how we are inspired. I realize that not all people are going to find this exclusively helpful. However, I do think that this is extremely true for all of us. I think that with the way that we've become so attached to like our phones and technology, and I notice this too even in conversations, I see a lack of like, when you're in a conversation with people, next time, if you're a person, think about this next time you're in a conversation, like just think about this. Think about when you go to meet someone, decide as you're in that conversation to ask questions. Just decide. And you'll find the inspiration to know what to ask if you're listening to what they're saying. But I don't think that this is happening a whole lot anymore. I don't think that we're actually asking each other things. We're just telling each other things. So it's just more a matter of like, well, let me give you my audible business card and talk to you about who I am, regardless of whether or not it's your business, but let me talk all about who I am. And then when they're done, okay, now's my turn. Now let me talk about who I am. Or here's some, article I read on the internet. Now I have all this information. Okay, oh yeah, I read an article too. Here's all the information I have. And I think that is like such an interesting thing. I do this. I participate in it. And I think that one of the things that we've sort of lost in a way is that we've forgotten to become students. And we've just wanted everything to be explained to us and everything to be handed to us. And if I go on the phone and I type in, I'm needing inspiration, I'm just going to Google what that is, right? We stop digging a little deeper. And I think part of that is because we don't like sit in silence. We don't sit with ourselves enough. We're not willing to wrestle with the problem. We've hit a wall and we just either decide that there's either somebody on the internet that's going to have an answer, or it's done and we just leave it. And I as somebody who is probably as stubborn as they come, for whatever reason, I'm going to call it a saving grace, but also a curse. It's difficult for me just to say, all right, here's a wall, and that it can't be busted through. I just have this deep belief that there's always a way to get through. In fact, the guys in the band always joke that, because I have some interesting customer service track records, not saying I'm proud of it at all. But, I just feel like when there's been an injustice done, whether to me or to some friends, I want to help make it right. And, I can't say that I have I'm batting 1,000 on that, but I've been known to have some success stories, but also a lot of not so successful ones too. Anyway, so I think the thing that I want to really hone in here for just a couple minutes is just what it means to become a student of how we can learn from each other. And I think the temptation is we learn from someone, and now I want to follow specifically in their footsteps. I've seen, like yesterday I'm listening to a podcast and it's really tempting for me to hear what they say and then end the podcast and go do exactly what it is that they're saying to do. And the thing is with that is, while there might probably sometimes that might be true, it might just be as simple as like, no, I mean, yeah, you do this thing, it's gonna lead to that. But I think a lot of times too, it's so much bigger than that. So I think what I mean by a student is we're learning and then we're taking some time to sit with that stuff and actually see how it can apply to our own lives. I think just a very personal example. I had this happen to me a couple weeks ago, or last week actually, where I was listening to a podcast and I was listening to like these business guys talk, because as many of you know, we released Fear independently. We released it ourselves and it was a lot of work, and I'm listening to these people talk about something that has nothing to do with music at all. And I'm realizing that, oh my gosh, if only I had known these things before I released this record, how much different could it have been? And it's not to say that like somehow the release was a failure, but it's simply to say that I regretted the fact that I didn't become more of a student in regards to marketing, in regards to like sharing the record. Now that we're independent, we're our own business, we're our own boss, which means that we don't have a team of people to help us do things. And I was just feeling a sense of regret. Like, why didn't I take the time first? I became a student of songwriters and of all these other things, and I put 100% effort into making the record, but I didn't put 100% effort into how is it going to be distributed? How is it going to be shared? And so looking back on that, it just became, apparent to me that, oh man, imagine how much different it would have been if I had just become a student. And I think that's what I'm getting at here, is that we just want to be able to expedite every single process of what we do rather than taking the time to sit, have conversations, to learn, to see if other inspirations come up rather than the first idea that comes to our mind, although sometimes that might be the best. But sometimes it's just a matter of like sitting with things a little bit and maybe just slowing down a little. This might seem completely unrelated to inspiration or to songwriting or to wherever you are in life, but I highly recommend, highly recommend you go and watch today, if you can, or sometime this week, a little homework for you, this amazing documentary. It's called Godspeed. I believe the website is livegodspeed.org. And I want you to go and watch that documentary and just tell me, one, that you don't get inspired, but two, the biggest inspiration for me that came from that was just like realizing I gotta like slow down a little bit. One, because people matter and I want to have those conversations with people, but also if I'm just like running a million miles an hour, needing everything to be on my phone, needing everything to be expedited, which is definitely my personality and tendency, and I still do it, and I'm fighting it every day to not be that person, to slow down. It is really an incredible thing. And so go and watch that documentary if you haven't. It's amazing. Last thing I want to hit on today, just in regards to like the student realm, is just, when as we are students of others and learning about inspiration and learning about the things that inspire them, being inspired about the things that they say, we need to say, all right, pause for a minute. They've convinced me, but doesn't necessarily make it true for me, right? And I think what happens is, I think we do something that is actually far more threatening and really, really like soul-sucking, is we see the success that someone else has had, and they share about the ways that they got there. And we either go and try and do the same thing, or we immediately start comparing ourselves, and we're not providing ourselves the space to just be admirers. Like, I don't even think we really take the time to celebrate the successes of other people and the things that they're doing. Like, we don't take the time to say, that's amazing, I love that, One thing a few years back that I just decided deep within my heart that I wanted to start doing is specifically when we were, the Seattle bands were forming through Mars Hill and all this stuff. There was a lot of camaraderie. There was also a lot of like healthy competition in the way that we were writing and creating. But I also saw the adverse side of it, where it became these constant comparisons. And so you would see what another band was doing or what another band wasn't doing. And so when one band was doing something great, you felt like, oh man, all right, gosh, we must suck. And then if another band wasn't doing well, okay, I guess we're doing something well. And I just think this sort of comparison just becomes this model of like, again, what are we looking to for the source of inspiration? The one that's got it all put together, the one that's bigger. Going back to the pastor sort of has all the information and all the knowledge. They're the watering hole, so I need to go to them to get answers to all my problems, rather than I'm going to come to Jesus. And I think what it would be really helpful for all of us is to provide a space in our lives, first and foremost, where as we're inspired, we're also admirers, and not just seeing it with envy in our hearts and needing ourselves to somehow be equal if we're not doing that exact same thing that they're doing, then we've just failed. And that is just so untrue, because you are this person that has these ideas and these different things happening in your life, and a story that's being written that's not like mine and not like yours, and not like anybody else's. It's your story. And it can be shared in so many facets of life in so many different ways. It doesn't just have to be done as an artist or as like specifically a songwriter. Like we tell our we can tell our stories and share these parts and aspects of us in so many different ways. But we don't just have to share who we are. Part of the process is learning and understanding who others are too. And I think that exchange between other human beings is so inspiring. Going back to like some of the competition and competitiveness and comparisons that happened early on in our movement of bands, what I would say now though, that's really cool to witness for the most part. If you ask me today, or if you ask a lot of those other bands who their biggest inspirations are, you know who they're going to say? We're going to say each other, our friends. And the reason why is because there was a point when all of us inspired and cheered one another on to be in this posture of, I'm going to celebrate what my friends are doing. I don't want to just make this about, they did great and now, oh man, I didn't do great, so I must be a failure. I must suck. Or that's going to motivate me even more now because I need to be better than them. I need to outrun them. Whatever it is, we started to get to this place where it's like, I'm just going to celebrate. So I can tell you now, like when my friends' bands release records, you know what I feel? I just feel so freaking excited for them. I don't feel this sense of like, man, gosh, we suck. We're not there. And I don't even say that to brag or to boast in any way. I attribute that solely. Again, we're talking about inspiration here. I want to attribute that to God, like giving us collectively in our band and in this community in Seattle, this unified just spirit of celebration and of adoration to God for what he is doing in all of our lives, the way he is inspiring us, the way that God is moving in us, the way that God is bringing things into fruition. It's a really, really special thing. And I don't think that if we spent this time comparing ourselves to one another, we would be the tight-knit friends that we are. And I just to say this again, I think that the more we become a student of one another, of learning from each other, I think it also plays into, again, there's a great book you should totally read. I've been reading it. I don't know how I have not read it. So if you've read it, then you can share in my excitement. But it's called Celebration of Disciplines by Richard Foster. One of the things that I'm just realizing in it more and more, and I've always known these things, but it's been such a sweet reminder of like how essential just like sitting in scripture and meditating on the word and having this desire for my heart to be changed so that when I pray these prayers, it's not just like, oh God, if you will, but believing that God will. Because I'm tuning my heart so much to God's ways and to God's words that slowly and surely the things that I'm thinking about are more and more of God and less of myself. And just to say, I think that inspiration comes from those places, and I think it's essential. But at the same time too, it's not a but, at the same time too, I think that we are intended to be verbal processors. And in communication and conversation with one another, it's a wonderful thing. It's a beautiful thing. And I think that the way that we can be inspired by one another is just so incredible. If I could tell you that there's more inspiration in the person sitting next to you at work, there's more inspiration coming from your kid, there's more inspiration coming from somebody you don't even know yet, but you might meet at the bus stop, or someone you go to church with, or a friend you've known for years, or your spouse, boyfriend, girlfriend, whoever it is, there's more inspiration coming from those people than the black box in your hand that is your cell phone, right? There's more inspiration from human interaction. And I think it'd be amazing if we chose to live in that kind of way, because I see so much of the songs that I've written and so much of the things that I've created that did not come. I mean, if I can tell you, they did not come from just one place. They've come from 1,000 places, even more than that. I think about how many voice memos I have and ideas because, going back to what I was talking about earlier, documenting these things rather than just letting it pass the wind pass us and just say, oh, there's that. But, oh, whoa, okay, there's something around me right now. I need to write this down. I need to record it. I need to do something to make sure I don't forget this idea, this inspiration. I think that all of those things that are happening attribute to how things are created, you know? And I think the more that we document that, the more that we take the time to just remember, log in our minds. Like I was telling my wife this the other day, it's so funny. If I'm terrible with names and it's fine, but one thing, I don't think it's reasonable to remember every single person's name. However, one thing that the way that I just think God's wired me is if I have a conversation with you, and you've probably experienced this, it's a really weird thing. If I have a conversation with you about something that is sort of personal, or you'd share with me a little bit of your story, I will more than likely, there's 10 times more chance that I will remember you. And then when we get together, I'll say, oh yeah, that's right. Last time we met, you were sharing with me about how your dad was sick and how this song had really spoken to you and meant a lot to you. I'll associate your face and the story together. And I just would say, I think that that's true for all of us, honestly, in different ways. I think we all have different triggers that help us remember. But I think, again, those conversations, these sort of interactions create inspiration. And there's so much happening in that. That's all I'm going to share with today. I really, really want to keep doing these with you guys. I think there's a lot of really cool things that we can be talking about. I really think that this is not only a matter of I don't think inspiration is just I kind of think we're at a weird crisis, if I'm honest, because and as we live in a world where physical resources are depleted, water, oil, certain resources that are actually we've utilized so much of that it's actually depleting the ozone layer, or it's affecting us in a lot of really negative ways. Like, we're witnessing the physical decay of the world, right? At the same time, inspiration has not ceased. It's constantly going around us, and it is a flowing river that does not run dry. That's pretty amazing. And I would just say, think of it outside of just inspiration as a means to creating, but just inspiration as a means for living. Just living, being, existing within this world, because sometimes inspiration will bring about a question and a conversation. Sometimes inspiration will just be as simple as, I'm just going to sit here and be still. Inspiration is all around us. I think God is moving and speaking in so many different ways. And I think we can become more awake. And let's pray for that. Let's seek that out. Let's hope that our eyes would be open more to witnessing the wonder of inspiration all around us. And so let's keep having these conversations. Let's keep talking about this stuff. I think that there's so many people that have lots of ideas and have been inspired in so many different ways. I didn't even really share a whole lot of personal examples of that, and I want to get into that over the coming weeks. At the same time, too, bring some questions, bring some thoughts. Like, it might not always be that, but at the same time, let's have some dialogue. While we might not be face to face, I do think there's some helpful things that could come from this, and hopefully, the more we have these conversations, the less we pick up this thing, and maybe we're just picking it up for a few hours a week. And it's because we know that social media, there's a lot of great things about social media. There's a lot of great things about what we're doing right now. It's just that when we're connected to it so much that it's sort of like our cigarettes, or it's our alcohol, or it's just the thing that our coffee, the thing that we really need to get through the day, it becomes really restrictive, and I think it can become pretty oppressive, and I'm sure you felt that. I've definitely felt that too. So what if we together pursue this path where we instead see that these times together are an exercise of growing in how we see one another, and how we listen to one another, and how we ask questions, and I think big picture, how we document and acknowledge the inspiration that is all around us, because it's everywhere, and it's amazing. It's beautiful. Guys, it's so good seeing you. It's so good, seeing your faces and names pop up there. I'm actually going to save this video I'm going to post it to Instagram live, so it'll be there for 24 hours. And then we're going to start doing something. We're going to put this on YouTube and share it to our YouTube page, because I think that these conversations are really helpful. And I'd love for more people to know about it that don't just follow our Instagram. If you're not subscribed to our email list, do it. One of the things that we've been doing over the past couple weeks is every week I'm sending out a message to everybody I'm not going to post on social media. Yesterday I did a post about fear and how the antidote to fear is fear. And so subscribe to our email list, and you can hear more about those things. The big thing here is just I want to find other ways of communicating and not see social media as as the sole means of doing that. And hopefully over time we can begin to utilize this amazing resource as something that's like rather than an oppressive, restrictive thing in our life, we can use it as something that's really helpful for conversation, for good. I think it's being used for that, but what if we multiplied that tenfold over the coming years? So anyway, you guys are amazing. I really appreciate the time that you guys took over these past 45 minutes, and we'll talk again next week, next Wednesday. See y'all.